All. My name is Aaron Tesh, and I heard you guys were talking about um, the importance of cultural diversity in your science classrooms, and I've thought about this issue a lot, and thought I'd share what I've learned. I think the most important thing about cultural or any kind of diversity is any system that requires adaptation, requires diversity. Without diversity, there is no adaptation. And um, the sciences are often thought of as uh, be not very uh, adaptive. Like we have a dogma of science, people just learn the facts. But if you look at the history of science, that is not true. We've depended on adaptation uh, to grow our knowledge of the world. Um, and being a biologist, the first thing I think about when I think about adaptation is biological adaptation. Um, but for example, potatoes are a really nifty crop. They originated in South America, and after the Europeans crossed the ocean, they it started to spread all over the world. But the and it's a really nice crop because you can just plunk it in the ground, um, and then more one potato turns into five potatoes. Um, and some economies like Ireland came to depend on this really reliable crop. But the problem with just plunking a potato in the ground and uh, leaving uh, and growing more potatoes is that it's cloning that single potato. There's no diversity. So um, before the potato famine, Ireland was uh, a one big cloned potato patch, and of course the water blight or the potato blight. It's a water mold. It's a little uh, animal. Uh, didn't have to adapt at all because all of the potatoes were the same. So it went through the entire nation of Ireland, and people starved. Another example is apples. All all the golden delicious apples you've ever eaten are a clone of the original golden delicious apple. If you plant apple seeds like Johnny Appleseed, you're not going to get very tasty apples, or at least not most of them. The reason why Johnny Appleseed was planting apples was not for good tasting apples, it was so that they could make um, uh, hard apple cider, because that's the only way to um, sanitize the water, or at least it's a very good way to sanitize the water. This the same thing that happened with potatoes also happened with bananas. In the early 1900s, uh, most of the bananas that we saw, at least in the United States, were called Big Mike bananas. They were very large. They traveled well. They were pretty much the perfect eating banana. But just like apples and potatoes, all banana these banana plantations were clones of one particularly tasty banana. And because they were clones, they didn't adapt, and another fungus wiped out the Big Mike banana trees. There's even a, a pop song of the day was a song, "Yes, we have no bananas." Yes, we have no bananas. Kind of goes, yes, we have no bananas. No bananas we have today. We have string beans and so on. Um, uh, so they didn't have any bananas because all the Big Mike bananas were wiped out. The bananas that we eat and you're familiar with today come from uh, they aren't as big and they don't travel as well as the Big Mike bananas. But again, we're going to they're having the same problem with the fungus attacking the Cavendish banana. So the fact that we that just because we have a really good potato or an apple or a banana um, doesn't mean that the system as a whole is healthy. You need diversity to allow you to adapt. Um, Another example is MRSA. The So it's a bacteria that's resistant to antibiotics. Well, one thing that antibiotics do is they decrease the diversity in the bacteria. They kill all of the bacteria that can't deal with antibiotics, and the only bacteria that are left are the bacteria that are resistant to antibiotics. So diseases like MRSA um, arise because there isn't any diversity. So, what does all this have to do with cultural diversity? Well, just as biological diversity is necessary, cultural diversity also might show some benefits. So, in our recent financial crisis, two populations that were at least a little bit insulated from these populations were the Amish and Muslim communities of the world. Um, the the Muslims were a little bit insulated because Islam forbids interest beyond inflation. So Muslim homeowners were protected from the the housing bubble because they have to um, change um, their borrowing practices to be in accordance with Islamic law. Um, Another community, uh, the Amish, don't like to. They It's not unlawful for them to borrow, but they don't like to borrow beyond their means, and thus were um, protected from the direct effects. Now, both of these communities were affected because everybody else was affected. So, um, it, but having different cultural beliefs um, allowed these different communities to fare differently in the recent global financial numbers. Now, what does this have to do with scientific cultural diversity? Well, we just have to look at Fibonacci and his his spread of the Arabic numerals um, that was a cultural technology. So the number system that we use today originated in India and it was adopted by Arabic nations, and eventually the Italian mathematician Fibonacci brought it to Europe. And before that, they used Roman numerals, and it was very, very difficult to make precise calculations, especially when, and precise calculations are really important if you're a banker and um, need to calculate interest rates. So if you're a banker or a scientist, it it does very well to use a numerical system that can make precise measurements, where Roman numerals make this very difficult. Um, and so this is a cultural adaptation. Um, and if we didn't allow cultural diversity in science, this would have never happened. Um, it also should be noted that we wouldn't even have the Greek scientific texts uh, if it weren't for cultural exchange with the Muslim scholars before the Renaissance. The book Guns, Germs, and Steel uh, even explains the strength of Europe's scientific, economic, and military might that ended up giving them the power to be the colonizers, because they were at a crossroads between the Muslim world, the Asian nations. All of these trading routes went through Europe, and it gave them um, the competition and the cultural and scientific diversity necessary for becoming world powers. Um, what happens when you stop diversity in science? Well, um, for a very long period in science, people just read dogmatic texts like Galen's work on human anatomy, but it turns out he was wrong. And it took people like Andreas Vesalius to uh, fight the long held beliefs in science that were just wrong. So Galen had textbooks in human anatomy, but Vesalius um, actually looked at human anatomy, and there are stories of anatomy students yelling from the rafters at uh, Andreas that, well, Galen didn't say that that thing was there, or you're missing the thing that Galen thought was there. And Andreas's response was, "Show me. I'm looking at a corpse right now. I'm looking at the uh, cadaver. And if you can't show me, then it's not there." Um, Another example of the importance of the diversity of thought is the play between Newtonian physics and Einsteinian physics, and eventually quantum mechanics. At the In the early 1900s, physicists thought that they were pretty much done with their job, and it took a patent clerk called Einstein to kind of bring out the dogma of the time and say, you know what, there's a lot of things that we don't know, and his view of the universe explains a lot of things that Newtonian physics would not be able to explain. Everything from communications with satellites um, to the computer revolution wouldn't have happened if uh, we were stuck with Einsteinian or Newtonian physics. And then even after um, Einstein overthrew the Newtonian physics, quantum mechanics um, brought up problems with Einsteinian physics. So science is just a series of um, uh, revolutionary changes. But these revolutionary changes can't happen without intellectual and cultural diversity. Another uh, example of this that I particularly like is when the swine flu um, came out. The pigs in um, Egypt were all killed out, even though those pigs weren't spreading the swine through flu at all. Um, but what happened is when you killed all the pigs, all of the vegetable waste that those pigs were um, eating started to pile up, and now they have a really big garbage problem. Um, and Egypt is a mostly Muslim country, but the Coptic Christians played a really important part by owning um, pigs, which are forbidden to be eaten in Islam. So even the best scientists will come up with different ideas on how their uh, experiments are going to turn out. And it's often a good idea to involve your intellectual rivals in creating your experiments. So you have lots of different ideas of what might happen during your experiment. So that's that's the method of multiple working hypothesis. I hope this little lecturette um, can make you think differently about why cultural diversity and intellectual diversity are important in scientific fields. All right, have a great day.